before we dive into these two examples?
Doesn't look like we have any questions. Peter, are you seeing anything?
Nothing specifically yet.
But please, people, ask away. Ask away. This is the time. I mean, we've got Shannon here who's like a plethora of information. So, definitely ask.
Okay, so I got two cocktails to show you. One is based on a stir drink, and the second one is based on a shake and drink. So why am I starting off with a cognac cocktail? Well, A, because I'm a sucker for banana, and B, when I saw this, I said this should actually be made with Jamaican rum. But we got to kind of look at the context of what was going on in the bar world at the time. This comes from the original version comes from the 1937 book, The Café Royale Bar Book. And originally, it's just equal parts cognac and banana liqueur. So for those of you who are familiar with that period,
Wow.
I know it's a lot. It's like it's almost like a tropical stinger. Okay, so stinger is cognac and creme de menthe, and so these were kind of heavier drinks that were more like aperitif. And I wanted to like the original recipe, but it doesn't work for us anymore. And a more contemporary version came out maybe about 5 years ago that involved Amontillado sherry. So instead of half, it's like 1 ounce of the cognac and then 3/4 sherry, 1/4 ounce of banana liqueur. And it does soften it a little bit and make it a little easier to take in terms of that added acidity. But when I looked at it, I was like, it's called Banana Bliss, and I need more banana, right? And the first one was too much banana. And then the second one, there wasn't enough banana. And I'm thinking, well, in 1930s, to mix with an aged rum was not a thing as of yet. Aged white rums that have the color filtered out, were the preferred cocktail rum. So that wasn't even on the table for mixologists at the time. And so I'm like, well, now we're in an age we have products like Appleton where you can mix with an aged rum. So I was like, let's to the feature and see what we can do here. So if you don't mind, let's look at the next slide here and talk about why I selected to do this updated version that I call the Cavendish. The Cavendish is
I love it.
I'm sorry, my dear?
I love it. I love the ingredients and where you're going with this.
Yeah, again, I'm crazy about banana. Every time I'm developing new menus, I kind of have to slap my hand away from it because it's so easy for me to want to work with it. But when it was time to come up with some cocktails with Appleton and with your portfolio, I was like, well, the banana element is not something that people play with too often. So I thought, well, let's dig into that. And I thought the most efficient way to get there would be to take Appleton and the Bray and Nephew and basically blend them in a way that you would blend different marks in a cognac house. So for those of you who are familiar with the way cognacs are blended, and this is true within rum as well, not often discussed or compared, is that, you can take different years, different barrel expressions, and then get what you want out of each one to come up with a blend that will give you like a signature style. And Monique, I would love it if you could share with us what's going on in the 8 in terms of how the marks are broken down.
Yeah, so the 8, this beauty here, it is our newest addition to the portfolio. It's an update to the Appleton Estate Reserve. So for those of you who are familiar with the Reserve definitely was a lovely addition to our portfolio. It's actually the first expression that our master blender, Dr. Joyce Spence, created after she became master blender. But the 8-year Reserve, basically what we did is we updated and we created this liquid that highlights the marks a bit more. So in this, you've got minimum aged rum. The youngest drop is 8 years old. but this is a range where you can find the range goes from 8 all the way to 12. And the notes in this are more prominent. So what happens is because you've got that, there's less mark, so less heads, less tails, and in this particular range, in this expression, you now have those honey notes coming through. You've got the spicy fruit coming through. And in Jamaica, spice is associated with cinnamon, nutmeg, pimento, those type of spices versus that hot, what you consider hot spice. And then you've got that vanilla that's coming through. And of course, what's synonymous with the brand throughout our expression, the orange peel notes. And then you've got that oakiness that's just rounding out the balance of the 8-year reserve. So I definitely think where you're going with this, Shannon, with the range that's within the 8, the banana and the molasses in the Ray and Nephew, along with the other ingredients that you have there, that is just a full-on rum experience. And I love where you're going with the Cavendish. So that's a bit about the 8 for anybody who hasn't tasted it yet. Definitely, you got to try this one.
Yeah, again, I love that you pointed out the baking spices here, because I think the baking spices were something that people might have been initially seeking in that 1930s recipe. It's kind of just, but here's more of the strain. And what I did was to basically make a clarified punch. So I'm going to revisit the 8 right now. Yeah, I get, the candied banana, the baking spice, which I think is an excellent for, a clarified punch style drink. So to make life easy for everyone here, you got the ingredients there. I think you got the build for the punch in the newsletter, so you can look at that later if you like. I just put this in bottle because I'm living an easy life today.
So would you always, in a recipe like this, would it be good to say that this is definitely a nomination for batch cocktails, large format or batch style?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because in the original iteration, like, you could easily bottle that. That just wasn't a thing at the time. And so I wanted to keep it like in the same spirit of that original cocktail in terms of what it was going after, like something that was, on a fuller body side, had some banana notes, had some fruit, but just add some acidity that I thought would do it more justice ultimately for what is more today. And yes, it should be batched out. It could go into a bottle. I had a little mini right here, but you could easily make a liter, take it to your next gathering, and then, bring some banana leaves, pour it over a rock, and you're good to go.
Love it. I should have had my sample here, Shannon.
I got it. So, again, the idea here is that I was looking at the banana bliss, and I was like, it sounds nice, but I'm not feeling the bliss. It just feels too sweet. And so I wanted to kind of bring in more of that Jamaica element that would give you those banana notes in the nose, as well as on the palate, and just a little bit of zip to it to make it a little easier to take down.
Yeah.
Got a question here. Where do you source banana leaves? Where can somebody at home find those?
Yeah, so I live in Crown Heights, so I'm able to go to the little Caribbean area called Flatbush, Asian markets.
We can hear Crown Heights in the background.
Yes.
Always delivers, New York.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can get it easily where I'm at, but if you don't have Caribbean markets in your area, an Asian market might have banana leaves. You might be able to look online, because I've noticed there's a few kind of specialty grocers that do deliveries popping up, but I would say Caribbean market, if you can get to that, Asian market, and to some degree, Latin markets or Mexican markets might have banana leaves as well. Do you guys see the package? All right, let me show you. And now that I should have had it out there before, but now that I'm looking at it, this brand, Luxe, is something that you might want to look into for other products that I'm going to mention in the seminar or for tropical cocktails in general. Like things like soursop, guava, different purees. You can get Luxe, you can get it frozen, things like that. Very helpful. So that's a brand I use.
And what a lot of people don't realize about the soursop is the soursop tastes like a combination of fruits. So when you soursop, you taste pineapple, you taste citrus, you taste banana, you taste all of that in the soursop. Soursop is one of my favorite Caribbean fruit. And depending on where you get your soursop, depending on which island you get your soursop from, it has a different taste too, based on the soil content of that particular island. And a lot of people, you can't compare the soursop from in Jamaica to the soursop in Barbados or Trinidad. It's totally different tastes. Same thing with the apples, same thing with oranges, totally different taste.
I also got some info from our team. Restaurant Depot or restaurant stores would carry banana leaves too, in case people.
Nice.
One other question here, Shannon, is wouldn't the half and half curdle by the lime juice?
So if you look at the newsletter, it's a clarification protocol that you'll see in various books. So you're heating up the milk and adding everything else cold, and it will curdle. And then subsequently, you're going to strain it through cheesecloth and wire baskets a couple times to get those curds out. The whole point of using the milk heated and then having it come in contact with the acid is that you get the solid parts separate, and then you have the whey or that kind of silky element that comes from the dairy that produces that clear color.
I love the clarified punch application. Love it. It just adds a different type of texture.
And if anybody's wondering, we have a newsletter. Hit us up. We'll add you to it. We'll send that info out to you if you're looking for it. All right.
Monica, bring up the soursop. We'll go. You already broke it down, so I don't need to talk about it too much. But I'm shocked that it hasn't made its way into more cocktails.
I know.
If I'm crazy, but the thing that really drew me to it was that it has that kind of like a really nice floral note in the nose. It kind of smells like a pineapple, tastes like an apple, tastes like a pear, finishes really dry. I was just like, it's like the stuff that every cocktail person wants to work with because it has your beginning, middle, and end. Like it can accompany every part of the cocktail journey. I'm like, why aren't we using this? Anyway, so that's a segue into the next drink. So now we're going to talk about Jungle Bird. And I'm really excited to talk about this because it feels like this drink is everywhere and yet not everywhere. Okay, so it feels like it's really easy to order one. I don't really see it on a lot of menus. I see a good amount of riffs. I see a lot of references. It's interesting to me. But the reason why I brought this one up is that I see this as a cocktail that basically kind of opened the door for people in the craft cocktail world, and we're talking the mid-2000s, to start to take rum cocktails seriously again and to start to take tropical cocktails as something that they could easily serve to guests of any stripe, regardless of the concept. So a little bit of background here. This drink appeared 1978, 1979 at the Kuala Lumpur Hilton. And it was basically one of the last tropical cocktails that got written down. Because at that point, cocktail culture in general, tiki was definitely on its last leg. Disco was reigning supreme, and people had other things that they enjoyed to recreate with, and cocktails were not really high on the list. We don't know who who the bar manager was at the time. We don't know who invented it, but thankfully somebody was able to figure this out and bring it back. His name is Giuseppe Gonzalez. He's currently based in Las Vegas. And
There you go. Pride of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I wish I was there.
We're hanging out. We're opening up. Weather's good.
Yeah.
It's a good time to come.
So Giuseppe, I think he's built a reputation for having worked in some of the best bars in New York at a time when craft cocktail culture was coming back, but also kind of having his own edge. And I love him for that. And I think the fact that he had the foresight to select this drink out of the ether and put it on the menu at PKNY was brilliant. As a little bit of background, Mr. Gonzalez, grew up in New York, also spent some time in Puerto Rico, where his family's from, so he's a New Yorican. And without having spoken to him about this, I'm maybe making the assumption that, his cultural background meant that he was a little more open to rum drinks than maybe his contemporaries at the time. And by his contemporaries, I'm talking about people he worked with when he was at Flatiron Lounge, later at Peggy Club, and then at Dutch Hills, where he got himself into a position where he was able to be a partner at PKNY, which was one of the first kind of bubblings up of tiki cocktails coming back to the craft scene. I want to say this is like 2003, 2005 when that bar opened. Forgive me if I'm a little foggy. But there was like this flurry of things going on. There was PKNY, there was Lang Kai, which was Julie Reiner's Hawaiian concept that opened and closed within a 2-year period. There was a Hurricane Club that was in Gramercy Flatiron. So people were kind of inching their way back, but they were a little bit ahead of their time. But this drink managed to hold on. So it had the original recipe is Jamaican rum. He used a St. Croix rum, but I put the Jamaican rum back where it belonged. Campari, pineapple juice, demerara syrup, and lime. And I think that what really helped this drink to endure in this stage was that it wasn't too sweet. It had a boldness to it. And then as time went on, especially we get into the early 2010s, and people were into bitters and Amari and Aperitivo, they're like, oh, I see Campari in there. I can rock with that. And so again, Campari, local drinking habit, this cocktail kind of like takes it and runs with it and kind of thrusts it onto the world stage.
Yeah. Ooh.
So this drink, I don't know. I didn't have like a grand scheme when I came up with it, but I just kind of followed my gut. I was asked to come up with a cocktail that was inspired by a reggae song, and I really liked Skylarking. I thought it was a really fun, catchy, laid-back song. It's by Horace Mann, and the tempo's dope. So I was like, oh, it's a bird song. I was like, okay, let's do a jungle bird. Meanwhile, I really enjoyed my unaged, overproof Jamaica rums. And so I was like, let's start with that. And I was like, okay, well, what would be kind of like the opposite of a Campari? So I chose a gentian Alpine liqueur. And then from there, I was like, well, I could use pineapple, but I want to kind of move it a little further in this kind of like lighter direction. So I chose soursop and lime. The proportions are more or less the same. I had to dial back a little bit. So it's 1.5 ounces of Ray and 3/4 ounces of the gentian liqueur. I use Suze in this case, but you can tinker around with other ones. I prefer Suze. I like the golden color. And then for the soursop, again, 3/4 ounces, and for lime, 3/4 ounces.
And Shannon, how did you treat the soursop in this application? Because soursop has that real creamy texture. How did you treat it in terms of including it in the cocktail?
Yeah, so the what I'm showing you right now, this is frozen Lefay puree that I cut down with water per the instructions in the back of the package, and then I put it to a blender to kind of like even it out. And then I went ahead and built the cocktail in this little bottle here. Lefay is one source, so depending on what you're getting, again, it tends to be a little hard to work with. Hence, maybe why it's not in a lot of bars. But I would say if you're doing like perfect puree or pack rim or Lefay, experiment with the one that you like the most. In some cases, you might want to not just do like an equal split of water and puree. You might want to do 1 part puree and half a part sugar syrup or half a part water, and kind of give it the consistency you want, especially when we're talking about, blended drinks. This could probably be a good drink, in which case you're going to treat the soursop a little differently.
Gotcha.
But yeah, this is a really fun surprise because, you look at overproof rum and you think it's going to be kind of like knocking you over in the face. But again, the floral notes that come from the Brain Nephew come to the fore. They're further amplified by the soursop. It's very dry at the end. So
Yeah.
there's nothing sweet about it at all, but it's very fruity, which is typically people think those things overlap. Fruity means sweet, but in this case, not at all.
Love it.
Looks great.
Alpine gentian liquor, like, yeah, that's funky.
Yeah, we had a question here. I think you answered it. Is it better to work with fresh fruit or store-bought puree in terms of consistency of flavor, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, okay. So if you're at home, fresh fruit, if you have the equipment to break it down, and by all means do that. If you're working in a bar, purees are going to be more consistent and cost effective.
Got it. If you're making a number of them, keep it consistent. If you're playing around at home and got the time, go for it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Cool. So thank you so much, Shannon. I'll put up your info here for everybody in case people want to get in touch. And always rad to see you and hear your voice and hear what this is all about. Oh, I got another question before we go on that. What's the season for soursop? Maybe that's to both of you guys.
Ooh. So seasonal soursop, like fresh soursop, if you're going to get it from the islands, I would say probably like June to October.
Got it. Awesome. So coming up, timely session. Very cool. Very cool. Stick with us a moment. We're going to bring Kat back for 5 questions and we'll say goodbye. So see you guys in a moment.